Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman. I'm the host of the show. On last week's episode, if you missed it, here's a moment with Jeff Fasano.
And all of a sudden, I was on the hike and moving, that voice, that inner critic was there, talking, chattering away. And then finally, I remember I stopped in the middle of the hike and I yelled out, "Shut the hell, who are you?" It was amazing, the loop that's over and over and over again. And it reminded me of my mother, the way she would talk to my father, and how I would hear that. And it was just this chatter. This is wrong, that's wrong. What are you gonna do? That's right. You know, I think it's about the work we put in to eventually hear that, and realize it's a conditioned loop that goes on in our minds over and over and again, and it's up to us to change that.
Good one, Jeff.
100%
That's a good
right
episode.
there, brother. Up to us to change that. Probably up to us to change tonight's show. What are we talking about, Jay the Rothman?
Well, before we go there, again, my name is Jay Rothman. I am the host of the show. Welcome to Real Men, Real Talk Live. Welcome back, viewers and listeners. As you jump on to YouTube channel tonight, I want to introduce my co-host coming in from Australia. He's known as the man from the land from down under, the Aboriginal. Welcome back, Evis Love.
Thank you, brother. It's nice to join for the full show this week.
Yeah, right? Good to have you back for the whole time.
Also like to welcome Jeff Fasano. He calls Nashville, Tennessee home. Welcome back, Jeff Fasano.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the program.
And of course, we have Jay Riddy, aka Josh Richard, coming in from Southern California. Welcome back, Jay Riddy.
Thank you. Excited to dive in tonight. Last week was great. God, we killed it. I'm excited for this evening.
Well, tonight's episode is episode 145, and it's one of those the titles that is kind of a head scratcher, if I may say it.
As you scratch your head.
As I'm scratching my head, the title is Relationships, the setup to validate your wounding. And this is a topic I'm just going to share just a couple of highlights of what tonight's show is going to be all about. One is you're setting up covert situations in your relationships to validate your wounding. How can we identify when we are back in a cycle of covert validations? What are the dangers of keeping our scorecard in the back pocket? Are we setting up our partner to fail to prove our wounding? And what do we get out of this subconscious game of pinball? Do we find fault in others to avoid relationship intimacy, leading us to a core wound of we are not lovable? And Jeff, I want to invite you to kick us off, get us hot, light us up, and drop into your heart space to share with us why this topic was one that resonated with you this week, that brought us into tonight's topic, episode 145.
Well, actually, Jay, as I just listened to you run off all of those points, there's a lot of topics.
There you go.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of topics there. Well, this came about as I was in a session on Tuesday. I have something going on business-wise with someone, and it's a woman. So this is really, for me, about women. And I stated my needs, what I needed for our next meeting. And subconsciously or unconsciously, I was ready for that not to happen. And then I was ready to fight that person because it didn't happen. And this is just me setting something up unconsciously to validate my wounding, which is a woman is never going to hear my needs. I'll be betrayed. I'll be abandoned. And that is what's going to happen when this person doesn't do what I had asked or stated my needs for our next meeting. And my therapist, Ron, went, wow, what a wonderful way to set someone up to validate or prove your wounding. I was like, wow, man, I never even thought of that. Well, all of that stuff that was going on within me, this is not going to happen. Then I'm looking for the fight. You're going to prove to me that you haven't listened to my needs and all that. Because none of that happened, because what I asked for and the needs that I stated were all satisfied in our meeting. And then when that happened, I felt like a little down about it because I wanted a fight. I wanted that fight to prove that, you see, no matter how many times I state my needs, they're not met. And that never, ever happened. So I'm just thinking, how many times have I done that in my life? And that is what brought about this topic, to see where some of us are doing that in our relationships with other people, setting up someone to validate our wounding.
So always the first question, brother, and beautiful opening. How old were you feeling in the moment?
Exactly. It was my wounded little boy setting up this person, mom, to prove there's no way in the world mom is going to even consider my needs. And I am going to set this up to prove that to that little boy, and that little boy is right. Wow. And that's really what we do, you know. I mean, that's what I was doing. Unbeknownst to me, unconsciously, I was doing that. And it was energetically, I was going, you know what? I can't wait to get on that call, because I know that's not going to happen. And I can't wait. And then the anger started to come up. And then I was ready for the fight. I was ready for the fight with this person and me. None of that happened. Isn't that amazing? And then I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh, wow. I stated my needs and my needs are being met. This person heard me. Wow. That was pretty, you know, it was an interesting and very, very enlightening experience.
And then the realization that all that was happening, like the aha moment, the wake up moment when you realized that this was a pattern you've been running. It's awesome. I mean, I love those moments in life when we get those ahas where we're like, whoa,
right.
Hold on, time out. Let me rewind through a handful of years and see where I've been running this. That's awesome, Jeff.
It was it's like a covert thing that we're doing in the dark, of setting somebody up to prove that my wounding is valid. And then when it doesn't happen, whoa. Because that little boy was ready for the battle.
Sure.
And you also think on top of who that little boy is protecting. I mean, it's really an ego program that's running.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so the program really is coming back with the ego. The ego does not want to find a particular win, or it doesn't want to have a certain thing being able to be solved, because it doesn't understand itself without many things trying to be fixed or solved. So you think, I mean, God, hopefully most of us humans, we all crave some sort of meaningful relationship, you know, whether that's romantic, work, career, family, friends. But when we start to go into that realm that you're talking about, Jeff, this goes back into those toxic relationships that many of us are finding ourselves in. And I was actually with a client the other day, and they were mentioning how in their current relationship, they weren't too aware why they couldn't commit to it. And when I started to listen to the story a bit, the client had actually started mentioning that, very similar to what you're talking about there, brother, that they had started to basically keep the scorecard so they could come up with a reason to let this person go. And then that was the big aha moment. And then at that point, that's when I took them back along their timeline, where they remembered that they were left and abandoned from mum and dad. So yeah, the story is just a common story at the moment, brothers.
Yeah. You know, one of the other things I really quickly, one of the other things I realized was how I am very passionate about my wounding, as opposed to really shifting into being passionate about all the amazing things that are going on in my life, all the healing that I've done. It's that focus. I learned a lot in this session on Tuesday about many, many things that I'm shifting and growing into more as an adult.
Beautiful, Bob.
What I'm curious about, Jeff, is when you have that moment of awareness and clarity around your relationship with that, in that moment, as you navigated through that experience with this individual, at any point were you able to tap into gratitude for having this new clarity and realizing that it was your, let's say, your wounded inner child that was setting you up for this confrontation?
What I was in gratitude for was my therapist, Ron. And I told him that.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it was amazing how he pointed all of that out to me. And it was, whoa. All I kept on saying was, wow. Wow. I mean, he was holding up this mirror to me, and it was as bright as ever, right back at me. And it was one bang, 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 very lovingly. In that moment, I was, wow, how grateful I was that I've done a lot of work up to this time where that could happen. And then these revelations, weren't really revelations. They were just, he pointed it out. You see the behavior and you're ready to own it, take responsibility for it, and then begin to transition and shift it.
And that's what I was going to comment about, Jeff, was that I love your, man, it's just so fun watching you grow and learn in life, because you do embrace these moments where you realize that you've been, acting a certain way or running a certain behavior or pattern, and you embrace it. And you see it as this opportunity. And I love watching you do that in life, because it's such a fun, positive. I mean, you don't beat yourself up in that moment and, oh, there was that thing again, or feel ashamed or embarrassed, or, it's really fun to see you embrace these aha moments in life and be like, wow, here's this great opportunity for me to change.
Yeah.
And to be a different person.
Yeah. I'm curious, Josh, have you found yourself navigating through these choppy waters in your past relationships where you were on a subconscious or an unconscious level setting up the relationship to
Yep.
validate your wounding? And what did that look like for you?
Sure. Yeah, it was 10 plus years ago in the really, I was unaware at that moment, and just sort of bumping through life in the pinball game of emotions. And I was covertly creating situations or scenarios or opportunities for my partner to let me down. I was testing them to see if they were going to respond in the way that I needed them to respond to me in that moment. And so I was covertly setting up tests. And I wasn't even aware that I was running this pattern or doing this. But now looking back, and after we talked about it in the production meeting, I was like, oh yeah, I'm full on guilty of that. And I was let down every time, and it was proof. Here's that proof again. And and like you said, Jeff, I was happy in those moments that the proof came. I was like, see, I'm right. And it was like, I'd rather be right than be a loving partner. What is that all about? So
When you say you were right, Josh, I'm curious, was it you were right that you're not worthy of love? You're not worthy of being honored, respected? What is it that you were affirming you weren't that was right?
I think in those moments, I wasn't even close to having enough awareness that I was right in my wounding. It was that I was right that, it was that scorecard. It was right that I give more to the relationships than they do, or I do more for them than they do for me. And I would set her up for these tests.
And when you
which is
take
pretty.
when you're keeping score, where does that eventually lead you to? When you're in that game of pinball?
A breakup. No, it was years of keeping score, and that's really unfair. And I'm calling myself out full on in this moment, and but we don't know what we don't know, and I'm human as well, and we all learn and grow from our mistakes. And but yeah, that scorecard, I held that scorecard for years. I mean, years, and kept a running tally. And that's it's a really unfair place for your partner to be in.
Why do you think we do? Why do you think we do keep these scorecards, brother?
Could I really quick, when Josh said, I wanted to set this up to prove that I'm right. The answer to your question, Ev, is we set these scorecards up because what we're proving, what we want to be right about, is an old belief that there's no way in the world that when I state my needs, they'll be heard. Mom. So that's an old belief that we have that has been conditioned and programmed within us. My needs will never be heard. Nobody will ever listen to my needs. Mom never listened to me. So that wound is in there. So we're setting these things up to be right about our wound. That's what we're being right about. It's not about the other person. We're setting the other person up. And we're covertly setting it up to validate that wound, to prove I'm right. Nobody will ever listen to my needs. I will never be heard. And then eventually you're going to abandon and betray me because I'm stating my needs, setting my boundaries, and that might cause a conflict. That's the old belief. That's a huge belief that was within me. So when we set it up, we set somebody up to do it, we're just proving that that wound is there and has nothing to do with that other person.
So I totally agree, brother. But where I'm going with it is that we've been conditioned to be either right or wrong. Ever since we were that young little boy or that young little girl, we've always been conditioned, whether it was on a particular high school or school assignment, whatever it may be, whether it was going through those later years with mum and dad, with the aunties, the uncles. We always just want to be right. But my thing is, wouldn't it be too mature for the child to even understand their needs? So it's this conditioning and program of being the right or wrong. But there is never anyone right or wrong when you're trying to validate your own needs based on something external to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Hey, can you repeat that, Ev? I want to hear that one more time.
It's exactly. That's exactly it.
There's never a right or wrong, particularly if you're trying to validate yourself based on someone else outside of you or anything else.
Yep.
The only way that you make the
Boom.
right and the wrong is when you prove it to yourself.
Oof.
Yeah.
That is the key.
And we're adult enough to know that my needs are, I'm of value, I'm loved, my needs are important. And if I state my needs to someone and they're not heard, so what? We're adult. We're adult enough. It's like there's no right or wrong, but we've got to move through the wound first to get to that place.
Yeah.
100%.
But I see exactly what you're saying,
Yeah,
Ev, in the sense that, like, with that right and wrong, where it's like you're deathly afraid of being wrong, that you'd rather set up a scenario to prove that you're right, even if it's a messed up situation, and you're covertly setting up these tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what's the alternative? You're wrong.
Yeah.
That's pretty terrifying.
So for me to be just open to receive the communication either way, I mean, wouldn't that be one of the most important values within any relationship? Communicate, to listen, to actually hear what the other person is saying.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Okay, but suppose going back to what you just said, suppose we're in this relationship, and no matter how much we say, well, you know what, this is what I need, it's not heard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not heard, or it's never heard. And we're the adult in this relationship, and we're going, wow, I state my needs, I set my boundaries, and it's never heard. So that person, yeah, bingo. Go ahead, Jay.
What do we do? What do we do, Jay?
Say it, Jay. Say what you do.
If we're in a relationship,
exit stage left.
There you go.
Yep, that's what I was waiting for.
Exactly. This is truly about the essence of what we're talking about. Is learning how to become your own conscious observer, first and foremost, of how you're showing up, how you are feeling emotionally in that moment. And secondarily, paying attention to how that other individual is showing up, meaning, are their words in alignment with their behaviors? And if they're not, then we have a choice to make. We could reach into one of our vitals. Like when you're not feeling well and you go to the doctor and they check to make sure that you're stable. They check your heart rate, your pulse, your pressure. They may look in your ears, throat, eyes, or nose. So we get to do the same thing. We get to ask ourselves this question. What's my motive for staying in this relationship? And is it good for me? And how old am I feeling right now? And how important is it? Why do we hold on to a relationship that's not serving us? If there's not that level of reciprocity, with respect, with honor, what are we getting out of it? We're getting affirmation that we're not worthy of anything better than this. And in that moment, as Evis should say, we could just go exit, stage left, see ya.
Or do we sacrifice ourselves to keep the other's wounds in place?
Mm-hmm.
Repeat that, Fasano.
Or do we sacrifice ourselves at the behest of the other's wounds?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason we do that is because we don't, in that moment, there's another core wound. We're not worthy of anything better than this. Once we have that awareness that we're dealing with a core wound from our childhood, then it's not their responsibility to rescue us from that. It's time for us to show up, grow up, and rescue ourselves, and really just thank them. Eventually, we could thank that individual for being our mirror to show us where we have an opportunity to do some more profound healing.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what this is all about? It never is about the other person, is it, Ev?
No.
Never, brother.
But how often do we blame the other person for all of this when we're running the pattern? We're the ones bringing it to every relationship that we're in. That wound keeps showing up, and we keep trying to prove that we're right, and that it's valid, and that it's there, all the while blaming everybody else around us for all of this, and then wondering why we get in the same relationships over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because every time, if you think back, Josh, think back to, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes in this moment right here, right now, and just trust me. Yeah, with one eye. There's Jay Ritty right there. One eye open, one eye closed.
All right, what do you got?
Think about what you just said, and put little Jay Ritty on your lap right now. See yourself as that little boy. And the last time he was about 7, 8, or 9 years old, and instead of him as a child taking accountability for his behavior, what did we do as that little boy? Wasn't it easier to blame the other kid?
Sure.
Because what were we afraid of? Jay Ritty, what were you afraid of as that 7-year-old boy? Tap into him right now. What is he afraid of?
I mean, afraid of being wrong, afraid of being called out, afraid of being the reason, the problem.
Afraid of getting in trouble, but at the deep part of that, I believe it's afraid that I'll be judged and I won't be loved.
Sure.
So when we have the awareness that as soon as we get activated or triggered and we're going there, we can kind of reel the line back in. We could reel it back in, reel ourselves back into the present moment, and we could step in as that parent for that little boy, that little Jay Ritty inside, and let him know that we're okay today. We can step out without feeling like we're not worthy. And matter of fact, what that will provide for Jay Ritty is empowerment. He'll feel like finally someone is showing up for him and protecting him. Does that make sense?
But here's my question for you, though, Jay. How often when we're in the moment of that trigger do we have the awareness? So what are some tools then that we can use to identify these moments when they are playing out in real time? It's happening now.
Beautiful.
That we can say, hold on, wait a minute. This is one of those. Let me remove myself a little bit. You got something, Jeff?
What am I feeling right now? Because usually it just triggers feelings, anger, probably anger or whatever. And if you start feeling these feelings inside of you, because that's what we want to move through. We want to move through the feelings, get out of our heads, move into our heart, and wow, what's happening right now? I'm feeling angry. I'm being triggered. I'm feeling angry, and be with the feelings, because those are the feelings attached to the old beliefs or the old wounding. And then we can move through that. So we might have to, in a moment, if we're in that moment with someone, do our best to go, wow, oh my God, I'm triggered. I'm feeling really super angry right now. And then say, hey, hold on, I need some time myself or something like that, because that's usually what's happening is feelings are being triggered, and that little boy could be throwing up, or a little girl inside of us could be throwing a temper tantrum in that moment because mom never paid attention to them and cared about their needs or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing we could do.
One massive thing, brother. And that's not only about your own needs, but obviously prioritizing other people's feelings and emotions as well.
Yeah.
Now, like what I always say, no matter whether it's a relationship, whether it's your intentions within life, whatever it may be, you've got to really identify those values. Now, are they aligning to your values? Is the relationship or the connection aligning to the values? Has the relationship become codependent, attachment-based relationship? Are your boundaries being ignored?
What boundaries?
What boundaries? Are there any boundaries up protecting those values, those wants, those needs?
And when we're in a codependent relationship, most likely we have no idea what boundaries are, because we're so afraid if we're set a boundary that we're going to be abandoned one more time.
Right.
I won't be loved.
I'll be alone.
My needs and stating my needs and setting my boundaries is going to cause a massive conflict. So why even state my needs and set my boundaries? Because they're going to just cause a conflict anyway. And if they do, then that person is not going to love me.
Right.
And what's stronger in the moment, right? Your needs or being loved?
Yeah.
I think being loved is going to win out every time.
Josh, that's really powerful what you just said there. That is, I think, the foundation of many of our relationships.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
And definitely asking yourself what love is. Have we done a show specifically on that, Jay?
Oh, that actually came up in our production meeting when Jay was. We were talking about something, and it was something about love, and I love this person. I don't know, and I was like, well, the first question you'd ask that person is define love for me.
Yeah.
And for many people, love is pain. And where that comes from is not even our own loving relationships as the adult. It comes from witnessing that in our childhood by our parents or caretakers. And what I mean by that is that if you have parents that consistently, continuously argue and fight, and it escalates and it gets ugly, can get physical, whether it's physical or not, it's still trauma for a young child. And then when mom and dad have that moment of makeup where they make up, that becomes extremely confusing for the child. And what a young child with a brain that's not fully developed on average until age about 28 or so, but the child, how they receive that is in a very confused state when mom or dad makes her apology the next morning and says, I love you. The child, the toddler even, receives that in a very subconscious way as love is pain. And so that child grows up, and then that child attracts relationships where there's a significant element of pain in the relationship. And that's the relationships that we continue to attract, because unless there's pain in the relationship, it's uncomfortable. That's the fight, flight, or freeze. And then the adrenaline is part of that relationship as well. Does that make sense?
Totally. Totally.
And even if it's not an intimate relationship, let's say, a platonic relationship between a man and a woman, or as a couple, our friendships can also, we say we love our friends, but how many of us are in a relationship with friends where we're at odds, where we're not honoring and respecting each other? We can agree to disagree. It doesn't mean that we dishonor and disrespect one another. If we truly are in a loving relationship, for me, that's about having empathy for our friend or our partner, our spouse, our loved one, having empathy, and at times having the ability to see them as their adult child and understand when they're suffering, when they're in pain, it's their inner child that's showing up in that moment. And can we invite ourselves to hold them? Hold them and invite them. May I hold you right now? Instead of coming back fighting, just kind of provide comfort and safety for our loved one that we say we love so much. Instead of fighting them, we're just validating to them that they're not worthy of being understood, being seen or heard. Now,
Sure.
I'm speaking from a different perspective. I didn't show up in my relationships in my life that way. I didn't know how. I came back fighting too. And what were we fighting for was for our own child within to be heard or to be protected, because the other child's coming at us. So what do? We're coming back fighting.
Yeah. What's going on in that moment is everybody's wound is being triggered.
There's the
And
pinball.
do you think we're going to show up as our best selves in that moment?
Really?
Hell no.
And I was just experiencing that with this person as well. That person's behavior and what they were doing was triggering my wounds. What I was doing was triggering their wounds. So everybody's wounds are being triggered in that moment. And you realize that, and but it's going to take work to realize that, and I just did it. So I laughed. Ron even goes, "Oh yeah, so you triggered that person's wound, and that person triggered your wound. So then it was both of you, these two wounded children going at each other, and all these wounds are being triggered." But I chose to go, "Oh wow, okay, I want to see all those wounds."
So what you did, Jeff, if I may, is you unlaced your boxing gloves in that moment. You surrendered. And here's the thing is when we have the awareness that we can take a healthier approach, which is where we surrender, the fight's over. What we thought we needed to fight for, we don't need to fight to receive that from another individual. We just have to be willing to provide it to ourselves. And understand that not everybody that's in our life in that moment is able to provide that same level of honor and respect and comfort in a relationship. And that's when we get to set a loving boundary and understanding that the boundary is not for them. It's not to punish them. The boundary is for ourselves, right? So Josh,
and you brought up a good word, Jay, that I think a lot of us men were conditioned with, which is surrender. And you brought it up in a good way, as in surrendering in the moment, letting go of any activated feelings. Surrender, for some guys out there who've been conditioned with it, means you lose. That's how I was brought up. Surrender means you lose. And I would have proven anything right rather than wave the white flag and say that I lost. So yeah, I just wanted to put some context around your word surrender, because different words same words mean different things to different people and how we were brought up. But that was my belief around the word surrender up until a handful of years ago. And surrender is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's actually, it's not disempowering. It's actually very empowering.
Empowering, yeah.
I'll share with you, Josh, that for most of my life, including my adult life, I was in a fight. I was always in a fight, and for me, when I woke up, I knew that the fight was over. I had no fight left. I was tired. And when I surrendered to the fight, I began that journey the journey of coming home. And that journey of coming home is truly about we don't have to fight anymore. Who are we fighting with? It never was my fight. We can't love and fight in the same breath. It doesn't work. But when we give up the fight and we surrender, the journey begins. We can come home. We can come home to return to love of self. And then we have the ability to experience what the true essence of love for others can feel like and be like. And that, my friends, is the true essence of inner peace and freedom.
And I'm guessing, Jay, your emotion in telling that story was having that peace and freedom for the first time in your whole life. Laying down the boxing gloves, setting down the fight, and experiencing what life was like without that for the first time.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, the emotions around that, I think part of it is a piece called gratitude, that I had the courage to surrender. First and foremost. The second is the emotion is just honoring that child within that I call JJ. It's about just honoring in that moment. It's just really holding him in a metaphoric way and just allowing him to, I'm hearing him, I'm feeling him passing through me in this moment. And that truly is about the experience, that intimate experience that many of us as men and women have missed or not experienced in our life because we're so detached in a very conscious way from the child within. We have no idea what that can feel like to even be in a relationship with that little boy or the little girl. So those emotions that come up, they're not emotions around sadness. If it appears that the way, sometimes when we get
No, it didn't at all.
right. Sometimes when we get emotional, we automatically, when someone else gets emotional, we go right to we feeling sorry for them, or we feel like we need to rescue them. And you guys, one thing you do really beautifully is that we hold this space on Real Men, Real Talk Live for one another and understand that in the moment when one of us may close our eyes and we're really tapping into the feeling or emotion in a moment, it really isn't about sadness most of the time today. It truly is about just allowing myself to really feel the true essence of what that little boy went through, navigated through, and had the courage to come out on the other end. And on the other end, the relationship we get to have today is truly around inner freedom and safety and gratitude. And that's what this is about. Truly, isn't that what life is about today? Isn't that what we should all be aspiring for? So many people think that they're chasing happiness. Is happiness truly what we're chasing? That's what society wants us to believe we're chasing. Well, we can't hold on to happiness long enough for it to be sustainable for the rest of our life. Why is that, Evis?
And that's another topic in a show in itself, brother.
I think we kind of covered that in episode 98 or something like that.
Yeah. What is the difference between happiness, Ev, and inner peace? Can you help define that for our viewers tonight?
Brother, let's make that a show, but on a quick short.
Yeah,
We've got to we got to really understand too that happiness can be a fleeting emotion as well.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Whereas inner peace is about contentment.
Yeah.
There you go.
So really understanding that part of yourself, and understanding why you feel the need to fall in love. And at the end of the day, my brothers and sisters, the name of the game is just to be in love.
Yeah.
Ooh, good one. Good one, Ev.
All right, let's wrap it up. We got 40
And what is it?
minutes to go.
What and the essence of being in love with anyone outside of us starts with being in love with ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there, brother.
Because we want to connect with people who are doing that.
Uh-huh.
So then there's no codependency in a relationship.
There you go.
I know my needs. I know my boundaries. I honor, value, and love myself. And that's what this show's about. Ultimately, leading ourselves to love, honor, and value ourselves. And when we can love, honor, and value ourselves, we're not seeking it outside of ourselves. And then what we're seeking are others who are loving, honoring, and value themselves. So then we can have a reciprocal or balanced relationship of giving and receiving. That's what we want. You know, you're not responsible for my needs. I'm not responsible for your needs. But as adults, we state our needs and then we negotiate those needs. Okay, your needs, what do you need right now? This is what I need. Okay, wait a second. Let's take care of your needs first, and then we'll visit my needs in an hour or two. That's an adult relationship, you know, and then you talk about it. You know, that's what we're aspiring to.
Yeah.
You know, and I have those relationships, and I'm sure many out there do, and I'm sure you guys do.
Yeah.
And we're talking, I want to be clear, we're talking relationships in general.
Right.
With this entire show.
Yeah.
This isn't, I know we focus, society focuses a lot on romantic relationships. Right. When we hear the word relationship. This is with coworkers. This is with friends. This is with family.
Yep.
This is with, these are tools for all relationships.
Yep.
Stating our needs and boundaries and loving ourselves, honoring ourselves first, identifying those wants, needs, and the values in ourselves, like Ev always talks about, brings it home to values.
Yeah.
And then communicating those with the world.
Yeah. Yep.
So with what time we do have left, gentlemen, because we're about 13 minutes to the hour, believe it or not, I want to invite us to kind of transition here to share some hot tips, tricks, and tools on how to cut the cords, break the chain, free ourselves from creating these relationships where we're setting ourselves up to validate our wounding. How do we break free of this rabbit hole, this pattern in the relationships that we show up with friends, co-workers, family members even? How do we break free of it? What are some tips, tricks, and tools?
I think, Jay, I'm going to come back to, what you stated earlier, which was, that accountability. When you notice a pattern in your life, and we are used to blaming those outside of us, having the courage, and I do use that word intentionally because I know it's not easy, but having the courage to look within and say, what's my role in this? Where have I potentially been an active player in this pattern? And honoring it is not, and looking at it and taking responsibility is not rooted in judgment. It's not rooted in blame. It's not rooted in pass or fail, win or lose, like we were talking about earlier. It's simply identifying something that has been negatively affecting our lives. And in that awareness, and only in that awareness, are the seeds of change. And so I completely honor that it's not easy to look at some of these things. It wasn't for me. I get it. These are some dark closets that we have closed and locked away and blamed the world for. However, when we do have the courage to open those doors, to examine what's inside, to pull the things out of this closet, go through them, sort through them, feel those emotions again, let that all flow through us and out finally, we can have some really beautiful, amazing, healthy, incredible relationships that are rooted in love, honor, respect, and not playing the pinball game.
Right.
Beautiful, brother.
Yeah.
What do you got, Ev?
Yeah, brother. I'll piggyback on that for sure. You know, we've talked about boundaries plenty of shows. I'd be definitely to exit stage left, setting a boundary for yourself, particularly if that person had any abusive behavior. You know, there's potential that they try and engage in conversation, could be through social media, could be through calling you. Just making sure that you got now boundaries up for yourself, even if you didn't have them in the relationship, that you've actually got them up for yourself when you've actually exited. One thing for me, when I went through that previous relationship breakup as well, and, you know, the thing is, I personally didn't feel the need, as many men and some women, to reach out for support. But for me, with a lot of the people that I now serve on their journey, particularly within relationship struggles, I really encourage them to pursue support, whether that's in, you know, friends that are close and dear, whether that's in obviously people that may be qualified to help you through support. Make sure that you pursue that support when leaving, because it can become, as I've noticed with clients, very isolating. You know, when you go from being in a codependent relationship going into being so-called alone, many people get lonely because they've really been harvesting a lot of those emotions and feelings based on those experiences with that other person. So really pursuing support if you feel the need to after leaving that relationship. Now that third one, and I'll just share a couple more, that third one, make sure you prioritize your self-care. We've done shows on this, brothers and sisters. You know, it's so easy after you've left any of these relationships, call it toxic or not, that you don't look after yourself. You know, we talk about the nutrition side of things, but we're talking about obviously that emotional wellness and that mental wellness as well. That a lot of this could have been corrupted and manipulated through the previous relationship. So prioritizing that self-care. Now that last one for me, be okay being with yourself. Be okay and become autonomous. It's one thing that I've seen that many people in relationships, they lose themselves far too often. And I put my hand up, man. I lost myself. And now I thank and show that gratitude to that person that allowed me to come back home to myself, but also to ask myself the question, if I go into another relationship, do I want to just exist or do I want to expand? And when you understand that, my brothers and sisters, you can start really allowing yourself to pursue these beautiful experiences that we have in relationships that I love to now call partnerships.
Good one.
So there's a few tools.
Wow. Exist or expand.
Simple, not easy.
Yeah. You know, one thing that comes to mind is that in relationships, sometimes what happens if you're expanding and the other individual is not? And that is a fear that does, you know, rear its head in relationships.
And it happens a lot.
Okay. So what do you do then?
Yep.
What if one's expanding and one's just existing? Can that be sustainable, or is that gonna sizzle out?
It becomes codependent. It's from my personal experience anyway, and from what I've seen, it becomes very codependent because that other person's always leaning on to the other beloved to fulfill their own wants, needs, values, and desires. But until you actually have an opportunity to communicate these particular things within the relationship and do it with clarity, and do it with authenticity, because many people, they sit in the relationship and before too long, it's gone 2-3 years down the track and they either still haven't exited stage left, or they're actually becoming that lean post for that other person because they're, like we're saying tonight, validating their own setup.
And then that's just going to make them bitter, angry,
Toxic.
sour. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can get slippery at times, and how a healthy way to navigate is to really embrace becoming, as you've heard me say tonight, the conscious observer of yourself and of people that are in your inner circle. And I'm not suggesting, it doesn't mean becoming judgmental. And it's a little slippery because there's a big difference between observing and being a judgmental observer versus being an observer with empathy. Now, empathy doesn't mean that you accept unacceptable behavior. Observing means is that you assess without judgment. Again, is this good for me, and that child within? And then at that point, then you get to make a conscious choice for yourself, a healthy conscious choice.
Ask the question, do I want to sacrifice myself to hold the wounds of the other in place?
Jeff, that's
part of the bullet points you read at the beginning of the show, Jack.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. I'm gonna invite you to say that again, Fasano.
Sure hitting home right now.
Do I want to sacrifice myself to keep the wounds of another in place? And it's simple. If I'm loving, honoring, and valuing myself, which we're coming back to once again, and we're in a relationship, whatever that relationship is, and we're on a path, our pathway in life is I've made a choice, I've made a conscious choice to do the inner work, to take the inner journey, to have the mirror held up to me, to be open to see my patterns, my habits, my behaviors, to see my old beliefs, to do this, which is what we're doing on this show. We're revealing all of these old behaviors within us and how we're open as men to look at that and have that mirror held up to us no matter what that mirror shows, and be open to it. If we're making that choice in life, that's the relationship we want with others, because that's the relationship we're having with ourselves. We're at a point where if another has made other choices, I'm not even going to say is not doing that. Another is just simply making other choices that are in alignment with these choices that we're making, then we can evaluate whether we want to have that relationship or shift and change the relationship. It doesn't mean we'd have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you know what? Wow, I'm shifting and changing within myself. Now I see this relationship. Well, that relationship is really not working for me, but maybe I can shift and change that, because that is a lovely, wonderful individual. And I'd like to have a relationship, but I'm going to shift that relationship and maybe create a different one and move on with life. But it still comes back to us. And do we want to be in a relationship where we are going to sacrifice ourselves and all the work that we're doing on ourselves to hold the wounds of another in place? I sure as hell ain't doing it. And really, I mean, it's one of the biggest things that I've learned this week, that I've done that. How does that make me feel? Pretty angry. that I'm giving myself up to hold the wounds of another in place, as opposed to saying, going back to, you were in this relationship, my wounds are triggered, that person's wounds are triggered, and maybe we're on a path of really understanding that and seeing that. Maybe that person doesn't want to see it or is making that simple choice in their life. Am I here to sacrifice myself to hold those wounds in place? So that, no.
How are you working through the what you just referred to as the anger? Because if you really
Having it, just
tapping,
allowing myself to have it, feel the feelings, go into it, release the charge of it, but giving and moving through it and letting that flow, because it's on the other side of allowing ourselves to have those feelings of that wounded boy or girl inside of us that is throwing temper tantrums because mom or dad never heard them, yada, 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 to move through those feelings, because it's on the other side of those feelings where there is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say you're angry, are you really more angry with yourself or angry with this individual?
I was just angry.
Okay.
It's one of the things that's really important here. And one of the wonderful things that Ron pointed out to me on Tuesday. That person violated my boundaries. That person did this. That person did that. I'm angry at them. He looked at me and goes, no, you're not. You're just triggered. Your feelings are triggered inside of yourself. Now you can project them onto that person, or you can go, I am feeling so angry right now, and have your anger, because that's why the other person did that shit. If we are really, all of our relationships are really holding up a mirror to our stuff and our wounding. So if that person violated my boundaries, did this, did that, and it really triggered and activated that anger, holy crap, that anger's been there a long ass time. Thank you for doing that to trigger all of this. And then maybe if I choose on the other side of it, say, hey, can we have a conversation? This is what transpired. And I just want to say that this doesn't work for me and this is not acceptable for me. Not, holy shit, I'm friggin' angry at you and I'm going to project that angry and you did this and you did this. If we can look at it, that in our soul plan, that is exactly what was supposed to happen, to trigger the deep feelings that are held in our wounds. That's what I'm choosing to do.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome home, Jeff Asano. Welcome home tonight.
Yeah. We could play the blame and shame game all we want, which brings us back to, am I going to set something up to validate my wounding?
Beautiful. Beautiful. As we are just over the hour, I want to respect our viewers' time and our co-host time. I want to thank each one of you for joining me this evening, and know that next week we'll be back at our normal scheduled time, 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I want to thank you, my brothers, for joining me one more evening where we deep dived into episode 145 on Real Men Real Talk Live. This is where we have grown up together. We have learned how to live, how to love, and how to honor each other's journey, this thing called life. Thank you for joining us, viewers and listeners. If you heard something you like or love, please share it out. Please share the link. Invite your friends and family to subscribe to our talk show on YouTube and or LinkedIn. We'll catch you all next week on Real Men, Real Talk Live.